So having a home is a big issue, right? So here's what I see with houses, because houses annoy me as well. My dad bought a house for $18,000, which is about £10,000 or less than £10,000, and it's probably worth over $1 million today. So something went on, and this, by the way, is not UK specific. The socialist countries had house prices go through the roof. If you go to Norway or Sweden, their house prices grew by 600%.
It's happening everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's not specific to anywhere. It's happening everywhere.
But what happened? What has definitely happened in the UK is we actually have a housing traffic jam. So in this country, in the UK, we have 9.5 million homes that have 2 or more spare bedrooms. Big family homes have 2 or more spare bedrooms. And when you look into who owns those houses, 78% of housing wealth is baby boomers. And now, anecdotally, I take my kids trick-or-treating at Halloween, and we go down a street that is big family homes, and you go knock on the doors, and it's all people over 65, right? And they're living in a big family home with empty spare bedrooms.
You think the average American over 65 is living luxuriously?
The average American over 65, so more than half of the US economy is in the hands of baby boomers, right? So they own all the houses. The houses got bought up cheap. Baby boomers still own those houses to this day. The big family homes with multiple spare bedrooms are empty. And now that creates this traffic jam where people my age...
My grandparents,
yeah,
they all owned property. All of them. All 4 of them died with nothing. Because that wealth which they had in property was used in equity release schemes. It was used in paying through their retirement. It was used in end-of-life care. Do you think when those old people die, young people today will be rich?
There is half the economy held by baby boomers. It's either going to be passed down or passed into the aged care industry or passed into... But the issue of why we can't get homes, 2 things. Government massively inflated the value of homes through debt. So they just injected, like low interest rates that you're involved in.
Who is the debt to?
Well, the debt is to anyone who can take out a loan, because if 0% interest rates or 2% interest rates...
Do you think it's the debt to ordinary families? Do you think the ordinary families are the creditors?
When you say ordinary families, you mean bottom third?
So if your average British or American family now has £500,000 of debt,
it's anyone
who has the credit?
It's anyone who could get at that particular time, anyone who could get their hands on a loan to buy a house.
But who has the credit? Who is on the other side of the debt? So if the average British family has £500,000 in debt,
a banking license.
Does the average British family have £500,000 of credit?
Well, a lot of people have got a lot of equity in their home now.
You think the average British family is sitting on £500,000 cash?
I'd love to look at what the actual number is, but it's a couple of 100,000 worth of equity. 78.
But what about the credit on the loan? Who owns the credit on the loan?
But bear in mind, it's disproportionately older people. So 78%.
So you think the average British old person is sitting on millions of pounds of cash?
Not millions of cash, no, equity.
Well, someone is on the other side of those mortgages.
Just want to say, the difference is if you inflate the value of a house, you don't have cash, you have a house that's worth a lot of money. So 78% of home ownership wealth is in the hands of people over 65 now. It's baby boomer generation. And they got a great gift from the government, which is the government said, we're going to just give free loans away. If someone previously could have only afforded to take out a $200,000 loan with low interest rates, they can afford a $300,000 loan.
Do you think it's okay that the average British or American young person will never own any wealth?
The issue is not whether it's okay or not. The issue is what do you do about it?
Do you own wealth?
I've got wealth, yeah.
Do you own wealth?
But it depends what you call wealth.
I do.
Yeah.
So do we, 3 multimillionaires, do we think it's okay that the average Brit or American young person will never own any wealth?
To me, that's
because I don't think that's okay.
To me, that's not the debate.
But is it okay?
It's not. Well, it's not okay. No, we want widespread affluence.
Would you rather that the people who currently are multimillionaires, would you rather that all of the wealth was owned by their kids?
I think that the way you see the world as a trader is that the world is a zero-sum game, and that there's basically the pie is a fixed pie and it gets sliced up.
How fast is the pie growing now?
There's something like this.
What's UK GDP growth at the moment?
Yeah, it's not high, right?
1%. How much did your wealth grow in the last year?
Exponentially.
Okay, so if my wealth probably grew about 20% in the last year, maybe 30. Okay, if our wealth is growing 30% and the economy is growing at 1%, where's it coming from if it's not coming from our viewers?
So I'll tell you where my wealth comes from. My wealth comes from building technology companies. And the way it works is pretty weird, which is that I invent something out of my head and I go to investors and I say to the investors, here's what we're going to create. And I give them a spreadsheet And then they say, we'll give you a couple of $100,000 to get started, which is called seed capital. But that on paper makes me worth a couple of million, right?
Nice.
But there's nothing has been taken from anyone at this point. The investors have said, okay, we'll invest some money. Then as the business succeeds, some more investors come along and they say, we'll give you a little bit more money to keep growing it. And I'm innovating something new. And let's say investors come in and give me £1 million and for 10% of the company, and the rest of the company is worth £9 million or $9 million, right? So I'm not stealing something from the existing economy. I'm bringing something from outside of the economy into the economy. And my quote unquote net worth is growing exponentially because investors say, we'll give you a little bit of money that values the rest of the pie at a lot of money. But
so everyone's getting richer.
In the wealth there's wealth extraction, which is what traders do. They extract from the existing economy, and they bet on the economy. And then there's wealth creation, which what entrepreneurs do. They come up with new ideas, better ways of doing things, and they build wealth.
So do you think the reason our viewers, the average Brit or American, are getting poorer is because they don't know how to create wealth?
No, the reason people are getting poorer is because economic freedoms are being eroded.
Okay.
When we have high economic freedom...
And you associate that with taxes?
Well, it could be anything that impacts economic freedom. So taxes and regulations are big.
Was economic freedom higher in the 50s?
50s was a interesting time. We were in food rations in this country till 1956. So we had 10 years of food rations after the war. We had a labour shortage because only really men worked. Women hadn't entered the workforce in mass. There had been 300,000 or 400,000 men killed in war. So we actually had this big labour shortage. The whole country needed to rebuild because of the Blitz had bombed it. So we had this huge need for economic activity and not enough people to do it. We only had 2% unemployment. People who had had their legs blown off were put to work at that particular time. So we had this boom, this post-war boom, and we also had the post-war baby boom, which drove consumption. And then when we got to the 60s, we had the roaring 60s or the swinging 60s, right? Pretty amazing time in Britain. And along comes high taxes. And they put up the taxes massively at the end of the 60s. And it pretty much crashed the economy. One of the things that happened...
So what were the tax rates in the 50s?
Well, they went up as high as 80 to 90% for the top,
in the 50s?
For the top earners. I think it was in the 60s.
You sure about that?
Well, I think the 50s are unique.
What is the answer, Gary?
What is the
I feel like you know.
They went up after the war.
They went up after the war.
Well, in the US, actually, tax rates got before the war.
But also the size of government as a percentage of GDP was like 30%. It was a tiny, like we are now 45% of the UK economy is government spending. We have got a massive
And who funds that spending?
Debt. The Bank of England allows them to print endless amounts of debt, which
Just debt?
deflates.
No taxes?
Gary, I want to get your opinion here because you're asking a lot of questions, but I actually don't know your opinion.
I just want to know what Daniel thinks. And I want our viewers to be able to research Daniel's opinions.
But how do you disagree with those opinions?
Listen, Daniel's a businessman. He's obviously a very successful businessman. You know, I've not been anywhere. I'm not a businessman. I'm not going to pretend to be a businessman. I'm an economist. I make money by being right in the economy. Daniel's a good businessman, and I'm right on the economy. You know, it's as simple as that, basically. You know, I'm not a good businessman, but I've got 15 years of being right on the economy. And look, I know you're probably a wealthy man. You probably don't want to pay high taxes. You probably don't want your kids to pay high taxes. But we exist in an economy where wealth is being extracted out of the middle class, out of the working class, very, very rapidly. It's benefiting people like the three of us at this table. It will benefit our kids. You know, our kids will be rich. Their kids will be poor. And I just think we should be honest with them. Capitalism's finished. We won. Well done, Stephen. Well done, Daniel. Well done, Gary. It's over now. Our kids will be rich. Their kids will be poor. They'll pay the taxes. We won't pay the taxes. We'll avoid it. I'll make money betting on it year after year. Why are we lying to them? Why are we lying to them?
Yeah, I think that's an overly simplified view of things.
It's an overly simplified view of things that has made me a multimillionaire.
Yeah, well, look, entrepreneurs take bets on the economy as well. We take bets differently. When we start a company, we're betting on how the economy would be. Do you think the
average British and American worker at the 50th percentile, do you think their kids will be richer than they are?
It depends if we have economic freedom or not, right? We're going to have a split test on this.
Do you think we will?
Right. We're going to have a split test. We're going to have... The UK seems like we're going to have more taxes, more regulations, and it seems like the US is going to have less taxes and less regulations. Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that places like Singapore that have small governments have got widespread affluence. There's not a lot of poverty in Singapore.
Yeah, except for the cleaners living in the closets, yeah.
You know, look,
but we don't count them in the statistics, just like we don't count our viewers.
That's not widespread in Singapore.
Well, there's a lot of people. I've seen them in the closets. I've seen them in the closets.
There are some,
but they're not Singaporeans.
Well, also
we only count the rich ones.
Look, the issue is that they've come from even worse conditions in many cases. People move to Singapore for an increase in lifestyle, right? You could take Ireland or Switzerland, right? Economically free places. Ireland was economically in a disaster.
Do you think the average Irish person lives well?
Well, their economy
50th
almost
Irish person lives well.
Their economy almost collapsed in 2011, and they went down the road of lower taxes, lower regulations, and they attracted all sorts of businesses into the economy.
And do you think that works well for the average Irishman who doesn't own a home in Dublin?
If you measure everything by home ownership...
I'm measuring people by the average. I want to know what the average man or woman in Dublin today lives like.
By the way, I'm also furious about the home ownership thing. Everyone is. I think it's utterly ridiculous the way... the idea that homes are now worth 10 times the average wage, all of that. The difference is I blame government for that. I blame high taxes where because of high taxes, they can take out more debt. They can then inflate the economy.
So do you think if we shrink the government, if we start to slash government spending, do you think that would improve living conditions?
Well, the UK government is 45% of the economy. That's a huge government. It's
so do you think
biggest
US living
War
conditions
II.
will increase in the next few years because we have a US government now that's planning to slash the US government?
Well, that's what the US voters have asked for.
Do you think it will improve living conditions?
Do I think it'll improve
for the average American?
If there's smaller government, I trust markets.
So you think the average US American will be richer in 3 years than they are now?
Here's what I trust. I trust economic freedom. If people have freedom, they create better decisions for their own life. There's 2 ways to make decisions, right? There's 2 ways.
Do you have freedom?
I got less freedom than I did when I arrived. Just
because my sister can't pay the rent. Is that freedom?
If you're living in a country...
She can't afford to live in the city that she was born in.
I agree. You and I agree on the problem. You keep bringing back to the problem.
I keep bringing it back to people because the people who watch... We're millionaires, okay? The people who watch us are mostly not millionaires. Is life going to get better for them?
Life will get better if you are connected to the most productive parts of the economy. If you pretend that it's 1955 and you recreate the post-war era conditions, if you try to go back to 1955, I don't think that's going to work.
Are we recording? 87% of people don't subscribe on the Clips channel.
Yeah.
Taking liberties. What? Just coming for free and then bouncing. What? 87%? 90% of people on the Clips channel don't subscribe.
That's what it says here.
So I've been doing all this for free. You've been consuming all these clips for free. Listen, we'll make a deal. I'm really going to make these clips amazing and you're in the Clips algorithm on our show. So can I ask a favor? Please, can you hit the subscribe button? If you've watched more than one before, how about that? If you've watched more than one, first one free, buy one, get one free. The second one, I'm going to have to ask you to subscribe. If this is the first time you've seen a clip on this channel, move along. You don't need to subscribe. But if you've seen one before, please do me a favor, help a guy out, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much.